Welcome, everybody. This is a talk about XR, what it is, why it's cool, Linux, why Linux is especially good for XR, and my project, Stardust XR. So, there we go. So, first of all, what is XR? So, you might have heard of virtual and augmented and mixed reality. Well, XR is sort of an umbrella over all of them. It's sometimes called spatial computing, right? So the basic idea is that this is a new way to interact with your computers and your devices, right, at its core. So if you look over here on the screen, we have an art program where you can draw in 3 dimensions, right? And you can draw using actual brush strokes that, they have texture and all of that, though. So it's really as good as real art, right? We've got one of the XR desktops, right? So you can use all of your traditional apps inside of VR. We've also got platforms like Neos where you can literally build anything collaboratively. So you can literally plug in nodes and you can connect up programs inside of this thing right next to somebody, and they can help you, and you can run all of that in that space. So it's really cool, right? But why is XR really, really compelling, right? Well, it makes the abstract tangible. So up here, this demo right here, which is in the top left corner for those at home, right? This is C-Signal. You take your device that you wear, you walk around a bunch, right? And as you walk around, it collects sensor data. With that sensor data, it then interpolates it, and it allows you to see at any point in your room how strong the Wi-Fi signal is. So you never have to hold up a phone and go like this anymore. And even better is it turns that Wi-Fi signal into colors, and you can actually see the Wi-Fi at every single point on your hand. So it turns the invisible Wi-Fi electromagnetic spectrum into something that's tangible, right? There's a lot of other examples. You can recreate physical stuff digitally. And now we already did this with our phones, right? We took calendars and planners and all of that, and we put them into this tiny device. But now that we have XR, well, you could take your fancy decorative wall clock and you could put it in virtual space. Now, you might not want to. It's not for everything. But there's a huge amount of opportunities to make it to where expensive stuff, novelty stuff, can be free. It can save on plastic. It can be cheap, all of that stuff. It can even be free, and also cheap in terms of making it, right? Because you don't have to make it physically. So it's the simulation space. You can take a whole bunch of real objects, though, and you can virtualize them. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but it is a huge, huge help. You can actually feel the wind, right, in a fluid simulation with haptics that already exist. You can, You can simulate a 3D printer, like I showed right over here, right? This is a virtual 3D printer that actually prints out any model you spit into it, right? You can do all sorts of things. It's a new expression modality. Since you're not restricted to reality, though, you can have cat ears, or you can have things, you can have floaty rings around your arms or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And that basically lets people express what they want to express a lot better. It's accessible, or at least it can be, right? So you have multiple input modalities. If you can't use hand tracking, though, you can just use a controller right here and rotate it subtly by the hip or something like that. And then you can translate that to any interaction anywhere, right? Sensory substitution. If you can't hear or you can't see, you can have a sensor, and then it can map that onto, say, haptics on your back, right? And this has been shown that in 2 weeks, a deaf person can start to understand words just by that method alone. They're not hearing, they're effectively having a whole new sense, right? And if you have a headset on you that can sense the world and can hear what you're saying or what others are saying, it's a huge opportunity to do this, right? And we have physical therapy. Physical therapy is long, exhausting, and a lot of times it can feel like it's just not worth it. But with VR, you can basically put people into a virtual environment that makes them feel a lot better. It makes them feel like it's worth it in the moment, right, compared to the entire long process. So, and more intuitive HCI, right? Our computers, as they are today, we've learned to use them, right? But they could be better. So, you know, instead of having to remember complicated key shortcuts or something like that in order to just activate a draw mode, right? In Stardust and XR in general, you can just grab an object and you can start drawing in midair, right? So we have some existing operating systems since, you know, XR has evolved quite a long way since the 90s. So we have Android, which is the primary headset that the primary operating system that almost every headset runs, right? And this is what the Quest runs, this is what the new Vive standalone models run, everything. But the problem is, Qualcomm basically owns everything. They own the two most common chips, XR1, XR2, they own the SDKs, they own, you know, they own the ability to sense the environment right now because there's not a lot of other SDKs that actually can do that. So, you know, it's not really optimal. And plus, you know, Qualcomm doesn't really have any objections with a company going in and collecting people's data. So it's not ideal. We have Lumen, which is a very interesting option. See, Lumen is a combination between Linux and Android. It's a hybrid. And it was only ever used once, which was on the Magic Leap 1 and then never used again. You have Windows 10 holographic, which is just Windows 10 with a GUI. It can run UWP apps, and if you've ever heard of those, you'll know that it was not ideal. It can also run 3D apps, though. And honestly, it was kind of the best UI for a long time. You have XROS. We don't know anything about it. There's a bunch of rumors, but nobody's really ever heard anything about it because it's Apple and they don't leak stuff. So. And then we have, last of all, Linux, which everybody is here to see. I say somewhat because, you know, we're getting there. We're not quite there yet. But you'll see why I think this is a good potential. XR companies want new OSs. They've made this clear on multiple occasions. First, we have Lynx, right, this is an AMA Reddit thread after a question I asked, and the CEO says that he wants to put Linux onto the headsets, though, right? Especially because, well, Google is not exactly, you know, they're trying to go in the XR market themselves, and, you know, how that happened with Android. So we got Valve, who is putting their money where their mouth is, right, and literally funding Collabora and other companies to, is funding Collabora and other companies to write XR desktop components, just like they funded Proton and such for Steam Deck. So it's looking indicative, right? We have Facebook, as shown by this article right here. They eventually gave up on doing their XR operating system, but they sure tried. And then Apple. But, well, Apple always wants their own stuff, so what's the surprise there? So what about Linux, then? Why Linux? Well, it's very modular. And this is really important because the way you do 3D stuff is very different than the way you do 2D stuff. So the ability to just take a few modules, unplug them, replace them, plug the new ones in, and have everything else intact is very, very useful, right? It's built for embedded, mobile, and desktop. So you have headsets that you plug into a giant computer, you have headsets that have computers inbuilt, and you also have controllers and other things that don't really need a full operating system on them. And all of those can be covered by Linux as a platform. It's privacy and security focused, which is especially important given there's a whole host of new biometrics that VR gives any app developer access to, so it's very important we get that right. The UX has massively improved on Linux too. Like, you know, if you were around in 2008, it worked, sure. And Ubuntu and Unity were pretty good, but nowadays, it is literally just the case of you put Linux on a thing and you can set your parents on it and it will work. I know because I did that for my mom and her laptop, right? And XR UX lets people understand their computer. But with Apple and Windows and all of that, though, they generally try and abstract that away from the user, right? So an Apple headset is most likely not going to let people understand what a kernel module is, right? Because nobody is dumb. They just don't have time to spend on this, and it's very, very complicated, and they don't have the necessary background. But with XR UX, we can make it more intuitive. Let's see how much time I have. Yeah. Give me a second. Yeah, we're good. All right. So this is an overall graph of the Linux XR ecosystem. It's not perfect, and I'm leaving out a few things, but this is basically it. As you can see, Monado covers almost every single XR application right now, besides, of course, SteamVR, which, again, I didn't have time to fit on this graph. But you know, these are all the XR desktops over here, right? Here's another one. And as you can see, though, we have hardware that already works and runs on Monado for Linux, right? We have the Simula VR headset right over here, which is actually going to ship running Linux, though, and it's going to be an all-in-one experience. You buy it, put it on, and you're instantly in a virtual office. Then you have Project North Star, which is fully open source hardware. It's 100 degrees field of view AR. It's really cool. The only downside is it's bulky. But if you don't mind that, it is one of the best AR headsets that you can buy. Well, you're starting to be able to buy kits again. So, and we also have content creation tools. We have Unreal Engine, supports it, Godot, and StereoKit. StereoKit is the best thing for apps. It's immediate mode, but for non-technical people, that just translates basically to people can make apps ridiculously fast. So it's really neat. And you'll notice Unity's not on here. The reason why is because they made OpenXR for every other platform besides Linux. Please get on that Unity. So we have OpenXR, and, well, why is OpenXR so important? Well, see, in the past, right, you had to write an app. And that app, you had to specifically use Windows UI libraries, and Mac UI libraries, and Linux UI libraries, and Android UI libraries, and iOS UI libraries, although Mac and iOS somewhat shared them. But nowadays, you can write something on Unreal or Godot or StereoKit, and it'll use the exact same library to determine how controllers work, how your hands work, how it should take the rendered output and shove it into your headset, right? All of that stuff. So it's really, really important that we have this because now apps are cross-platform by default in a lot of cases, right? So that's really cool. And yeah, it's worked in Linux since day one, which is really nice. Thank you, Kronos. Oh, and Kronos are the people who made OpenXR and OpenGL and Vulkan. So they know how to do standards, right? So this is not going anywhere. Yeah, and now we can get rid of all of those old APIs. And we, of course, have bridges to a lot of them, so even your old VR apps can work. This is Monado. Monado, in my opinion, is the backbone of XR on Linux. Right? And the reason why it's the backbone is because a lot of apps run on this, though. SteamVR, right, which is what Valve has for Steam and also VR for their headsets, right? That only works with games that are on, basically on Steam, right, and a few others. But you can't really build a headset and put SteamVR on it if it runs standalone. So Monado is incredibly important. Now, Monado isn't just for Linux. It's also for Android, too. It shares almost all of its code, and I even have a way to get it to where you can run Monado Android apps on Linux. I haven't implemented that yet, but it is theoretically doable. A lot of people have told me. Anyway, so Monado has some really cool features, like Slam. Now, Slam is basically the ability for your headset to use its cameras, take a look at the world, or at least roughly where certain feature points are in the world, and then determine where the headset is relative to that. Translating that, it means it can know where you are in space, and it can scan its environment, at least roughly. Right? And so that's incredibly important to have, because otherwise, without some setup like lighthouses in the corners of your room, you cannot know where you are in space, which can contribute to motion sickness and limits your ability to do things and all of that, though. So now we have Slam, or at least an early version of it, free and open source software for anybody to use and improve on, right? And it's really fast, too. We also have hand tracking. So a lot of people have this idea of VR gloves, right? You slip on a glove and it'll know how your hands are positioned. But it turns out in practice, it's actually kind of easier for the thing to just use cameras and use neural networks and just estimate where your hand is positioned. And so Monado now has one of that. And it is actually, I would argue, competitive with all of the industry leaders, which is really ridiculously amazing. So this is the hand tracking here, and this is the SLAM, right? So it's really, really cool. And this is what Simula uses. This is what Northstar will likely use, all of that. So it's really cool. So this is an overall graph of the XR desktops, right? The way that you use your 2D applications in an AR or VR headset. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. It's quite a dense thing. But, you know, basically the whole point of Stardust, right? The whole point is to be insanely flexible, and yet that flexibility is something that anybody can use, right? We have Simula, which is a lot more single purpose. It's designed for using your 2D applications, you know, in the headset and completely distraction-free, right? We have WXRC, which is a bit more experimental. It's all about, well, how do we take all of these XR apps and make them work together Linux style, right? We have XR Desktop, which is meant for, you know, something like I'm in a game and I want to access my 2D stuff from GNOME or KDE, right? And I don't want to have to get out of that game, and so that's what XR Desktop excels at. But it can run on its own, too. It's even run on a Raspberry Pi before, which is pretty impressive. And then we have Zen. Zen is interesting because it's sort of a hybrid, right? You have a computer, right? The idea is you have a laptop or something like that. Zen has a 2D component, and then you hit a button and it switches to VR, right? And so that only works with a Quest. It doesn't work with Monado. Every other one works with Monado, right? But I just thought that was really interesting, and personally, I think they're all really neat. But why Stardust XR? Why do I think that this is something really, really cool and special, besides, you know, the fact that I'm the main developer for it right now? And the reason why is, one, real life is complicated. With a lot of these XR desktops, though, their UI is hard-coded, meaning that if you're in a situation, right, like say you're on an airplane, right, and you have a really cramped space in front of you, and you can't really move around a lot of those XR desktops aren't really made for that kind of situation. And I mean, you can't expect them to be, because there's just infinite different places that you'll go in real life. But it doesn't really work all that well. Like, for example, Simula, though. Simula's, okay, Simula's a bad example, actually. That one does work pretty well. I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. I'm just going to skip that one and come back to it. Okay, so XR requires new designs, right? With a keyboard and a mouse and a touchscreen, right? We were able to do that inside of 2D because we have a frame that every single device is in. Now that we don't have that frame and we're free to move about in the world however we like with these XR devices, well, we need to use stuff that's more natural to that, like hands, for example, though, because, you know, keyboards are one-dimensional, though. You type a key and it goes forward, right? And mice are two-dimensional, and same thing with touch, right? So it's pretty important. Oh, and by the way, as for the first slide, the Linux XR desktops are doing kind of well in the airplane example, but something like an Oculus Quest just really has a difficult time, especially with the new upgrade where you can physically touch the panels, right? So, you know, if you can't physically touch the panel because it's clipped into a seat, I mean, that's not going to work well. Sorry. Anyway, privacy is essential. Now, the necessary data for XR to work is your head position and your hand/controller positions. You don't generally, like, you don't technically need your hand or controllers, but without them, you're not really going to get a lot of work done, you know? So it's important that that data be private. So with Linux, and especially with Stardust, though, there are several points in it that you can apply differential privacy, which is a mathematical privacy method to prove that your data is private, right? So it's important. It's not just guessing and checking, right? I'm not going to go over these 2 points, but Q&A is there if you like it. So accessibility is more intuitive. In 2D desktops, you generally have a situation where in order to add a magnifier or in order to add a screen reader or such, though, these aren't components you can easily just slot into the desktop. You generally have to edit code, you have to make exceptions to rules you gave, and so on, and it becomes very difficult. There's a reason why even with so many disabled people working on Linux as it is right now, we still struggle with accessibility in several key areas. But with Stardust, I hope to change that because everything in Stardust is an object. Right? You can have virtual TVs, you can have virtual wristwatch, all of that stuff. But you can also have an object that you can grab and you can hover around and it can tell you what is around you because it knows, right? Or you can have an object that you can move your hand a slight bit. Say you have pain, right, and you can't really do all of this or such. You can move your arm a slight bit, and then you can have a virtual hand or something like that that moves around a lot. So you can do everything that anybody else can, right? And this will work with all of your favorite apps, whether they're 2D or XR, right? Anyone can innovate on it. Learning a new code base is very difficult, and it takes a lot of time, and that's something that halts people in their tracks when trying to contribute. But because you can just make a new object, and the API is relatively simple, anybody can just pick up and try it. And even if they don't succeed the first try, it's always very simple to try again, right? Doesn't reinvent the wheel. A lot of other XR desktops have their own idea of how we should do 3D apps, right? And there are certain advantages to that, though, right? Like we get to more tightly control it. However, there are also some disadvantages. Like, for example, a lot of different apps not working, the apps that do work being not cross-platform, like with OpenXR, and so on. So Stardust supports Wayland and soon X for all of your 2D apps, and will support OpenXR for all of the 3D apps, right? So I don't want to reinvent anything. We have multiple UIs for one thing. That sort of ties into the first one where real life is complicated, so therefore we have to have something that fits your current situation and is written in Rust, right? So that basically means that it doesn't crash almost ever, which is huge when you're dealing with desktops because I'm sure a lot of you have encountered a lot of crashes. And in XR, it's especially painful. Oh, wow, it's already time for the demo. Who could have guessed? Let's see, Safira, have you got the demo working? Okay. Okay. Guess we're going with what we got. Unless you want to get pull and try again. I'll try in a bit. So, okay. We have the read back here. We switch to 3-DOF tracking. Okay. You all can see that well enough, right? Yeah. Okay. So, to start off with, we have the built-in hands, right? So these are your hands tracked through the traditional OpenXR hand tracker here. This one is proprietary, it's Ultraleap. However, the open source one is being refined to work for this particular headset as we speak. Let's run a demo. Yep. What time is it anyway? Oh, this is a Rift S from Oculus. However, the drivers are 100% open source. Thanks to, I believe it is Jan from the Monado community. Okay. The launcher isn't quite working in this setup yet. Otherwise, I would use that. Wait, okay, and shut up. Anyway, so this is a cool demo called Magnetar. So what Magnetar's deal is, oh, I can't reach it. What Magnetar's deal is anything inside of it you can move up and down. Actually, if the demos aren't working, I do have a backup strategy, which is videos. Sorry. No, that's not the proper plug. Huh? Plugging in the SD card with all the videos to show off. Because this thing does work. It's just that this particular setup was kind of hacked together because, well, simply put, it's still in early stages. But, you know, I want to show you all what cool stuff we've done. So, and eventually, I'm sure, Saphira and the rest of the Stardust community will get those demos up and operational. If the file manager will launch, that is. I can't believe it. We broke the whole thing. It's impressive. Oh, this always happens. How about this? While I'm fixing this up, why don't we do a Q&A, just to make it easier on everybody? And also, if there are any questions in Discord or such, then feel free to ask. Yep. Yeah,
sure. You mentioned it was modular in some sense, so potentially is there a world where you have external applications that produce 3D objects that then get rendered by your system, and then there are other processes that allow you to interact with those individual objects?
That's absolutely.
Is that the vision? Like, yeah.
Well, partially. See, the thing about Stardust is, in part of not reinventing the wheel, I decided that it's not best if Stardust is the main thing that you render your apps on, right? It's very platform specific. It will only work on Linux, from what I can tell, because of the intricate way in which it works, right? It also renders its own stuff, which means that flexibility is somewhat limited, but that's a trade-off for being able to actually render all of the different system UI elements in one place, right? Which is necessary for speed and maintainability and a bunch of other things, right? However, right, there are some extensions to already existing apps that absolutely would work great in Stardust. So an example is something I call an app shell. It is an application that starts a Stardust client, right, which creates a virtual object, then puts that application inside the 3D object. So your 2D application is doing most of the work, right? But your 3D object can augment it, right? So you could literally take something like Waydroid, right, which lets you run Android straight on Linux, right, with no emulation or anything, and you could wrap a virtual phone around it. And now you can take that phone and you can actually use a touchscreen on it. And I have screenshots and videos of Waydroid on this USB drive once it decides to actually plug into the computer. So, yeah. I'm going to try something else. So, go ahead with your question.
Right. So I was curious about, you said that it was open drivers, but it's Oculus, and so I'm not too familiar with how it would work, but does that mean that we could use it without having to go through all of Facebook's rigmarole of setting up, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The way that it works, though, is that the drivers on Windows, right, they contain all of the account sign up and all of that shenanigans, right? So since we rewrote the whole thing from scratch, there's none of that, though. You literally just plug it in, start Monado, get it configured, and you're good to go. So it's a lot better, though. You can even use all really old headsets. Like, this will work with the GK2 just fine, at least last I heard. So. Any other questions? Okay, I shall check in the Discord to see if there are any more questions, and then try and get this thing plugged in again. Okay, guess I'm trying to get this working again. Sorry for all the technical issues. I did my best to get them all working beforehand. Wait, who?
It's just part of giving a talk.
Yeah, I know. I know it's always part of giving a talk. Worst case scenario. Well, if I can get this to work.
Well, wait, just,
Yep, go ahead.
okay, so you talked about not having to wave your arms around, and just how sensitive is it? I noticed that when you were typing, we could see that actually, with your fingers actually moving as you were typing. Is that trackable in a way that can be used as a gesture? At that level, you know, where you were just typing and moving about like that?
While it does have that level of precision, it is not that accurate, right? Which translates to, the smallest unit it can measure is definitely close to a millimeter, although technically it would be the lowest the floating point is. But point is, though, is that because it's using neural networks to just guess where your hands are, it is by no means a perfect system. It looks visually great. It's definitely doable for stuff like pinch and grab, you know, and point and scissors and all of that, right? But it's not quite the fidelity where you can just type on a surface as like a laser keyboard. However, you can design UI around the limitations of this thing and still make it really, really valuable, right? In fact, I will show you, if I can get this to work. Yeah. These are my friends who are working on a bunch of these interactions that can turn small actions into bigger ones and remap input, called DOFDev, right? So, hang on. So this is, for example, the stretch cursor, right? And the whole point of the stretch cursor is that you can take two controllers, right, move them a slight bit, and now you've got an input that's way over here, right? So it's a lot more comfortable for you to do that than to just reach out there yourself. You've got color cube, which is a way to choose colors, you know. You got orbital view, a way to rotate things while only moving your head around instead of having to, you know, walk around it. Lots of other things, right? Good question, though. Any other questions? Oh, something changed. Util.sh has been changed. So then, let's see if we can get it to work this time. Right. Nope. Right, yep, good idea. Or else I'll just do // Nope. Nope. Oh, and it's back to trying to get this SD card to plug in. Unless this thing has an SD card slot. No. What do you mean? Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, it should be. Actually, I think I know. I think I might know what's wrong here. Nope. Goodness. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that might very well help. This thing's just broken. Oh, goodness. That might do it. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, God, no. The one time that I need it most. Oh, that's just a permissions issue. I can fix that. I don't have time to worry about this. So, oh, I gotta do dash R. There we go. Stardust videos. Now we have all the cool videos about this. So, this is my latest one, comment. I might have shown this to some of you. Oh my goodness. Oh, and now video rendering's an issue, classic. Yeah, so I might have shown this to some of you, but ignore the flashing line at the bottom. But as you can see, though, you can grab it and you can draw in midair with this pen wherever. Now, some of you might remember Compiz, right, which was an old compositor for Linux and X, and it allowed you to do a similar thing. However, with it, you had to do a complicated keyboard shortcut to remember. With this, you can just grab the pen and start drawing anywhere you like, right? So it's really, really useful. Okay? Oh, only videos, really? I'm just gonna install this and then hope it installs in time. So, let's see another cool demo. Oh yeah, this one's really cool. So this is the media demo. Oh, hang on. So this is the media demo, right? This is an audio file played on a completely different music player, right? But it's represented here as a tiny little iPod thing where you can literally scrub the volume, right? So that ties into what you were saying about having 3D interfaces for things, right? So, let's see. You know how I mentioned, oh, nope. Okay. We're going to open this in celluloid, and we're going to have a good time. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That's much better. Right, so this is Magnetar, right? As you can see, it has an opening animation right here. Oh, I just showed the opening animation in that one. I could have sworn that there was, I love this one. So this was back in the old C++ one. However, we can replicate this even today, right? So as you can see, we have orbit, which is those little tiny things on top, right? And then we have poltergeist, which is that, I have a laser pointer. Then we have poltergeist, which is that TV right there. And then we have magnetar, which is those rings around. So here, I'm showing that you can kill any one part of this, and the whole system will still be intact, and you can still use it, right? So it's very crash resistant. Oh my goodness, the black lines are back. Right? Oh, here's another one, though. So this is a bit of a unique interface, right? This is me playing anime on a sort of virtual tablet. You can see that there's handles to the sides, right, that I planned on making it to where you could actually grab, right? So you can actually move them, and then you can also twist them to sort of break the tablet, and then the actual application inside of it would be in the center. And you could just grab them, drop it into something else, right? this shows off one of the cool systems that I introduced called zones, right? And so what zones are is anything inside the zone moves with the zone, right? So it's really simple, but you can make a zone controlled by anything. So eventually you can make a zone controlled by your hand. So you can grab whole giant collections of objects with just your hand, with just like moving it a small amount to the side, right? And I am going to get a better, oh, I can sort this by new. That's modified. Here we go. Oh, I love this one. So this shows how you can have a natural sense of momentum and such inside of this, right? You can just take an object, you can literally drag it and fling it straight into the panel, and it'll just work, right? So it's very, the way the input system is structured, it's very sort of sloppy, not in a bad way. Like you just have to be closest to the object you want to interact with, and then you can start interacting with it. So it can correct for if your hands are super shaky, or if you're not good at fine motor control, or any of that though, right? Even without all of the DOFs and other interactions that can manipulate your input. Right? And then this, here's the one I wanted to show off. So this is Protostar, right? You can grab the side of it, and you can move it up and down to move your entire workspace up and down. So it's sort of the equivalent of GNOME workspaces or such inside of XR, right? And as you can see, if your window is outside, right, then it won't work. So this is Flatland, for the record. Flatland is a way to interact with your 2D windows similar to what a lot of other compositors do, right? Similar to what a lot of other XR desktops do. Okay, I'm installing VLC. So, let's see. This is a whole demo of a bunch of different clients that Safira Kai took video of and edited. This one works really, really well. So this shows off Protostar, right? And the whole point of Protostar is that you should be able to take oh my god, this is so slow, what the hell? Oh, VLC is installed now, hooray. I'm so sorry. How can I ever repay you, VLC people? I'm sorry I'm making fun of you at the booth. There we go, it actually is working properly this time. Okay, so VLC saved the day. So as you can see, Protostar, right? You can grab this cube, drop it in space, and it'll instantaneously launch the app right there, right? Because in XR, you don't want to just pop up in front of you because, I mean, you're inevitably going to have that be in an inconvenient place. So why not, with a simple action, grabbing it and dropping it, launch the app right there, right? And then we have atmosphere. So like I mentioned before with this emotional assistance, right, that what environment you have can make you feel different ways, can make you more energized or relaxed or so on. Well, atmosphere is a way to change that environment, similar to home space and other things. However, because it's just another client, with AR, you don't have to have it. And this is an early version of Flatland, right, where, as you can see, you can control it. And it was a rough mode of control, right? You can literally just tap like that, but the point is, it works with a lot of your favorite apps right now. And this is Gravity. It makes it to where in scripts, you can control where things spawn in. So it's kind of like Protostar, except for the terminal. So all of you nerds who like to create shell scripts and such, you can use all of that, you know? And even better, it stacks, right? So you can automate this if you're an Uber Linux nerd. And then, oh, hang on. At the end, we're showing off Manifold. So if you're in VR, you might want a physical keyboard, right? And if you have Stardust running inside of your 2D desktop, one of the best ways to do that is to simply, hang on, where is Manifold actually? Atmosphere. Oh, it's Flatland and Manifold, right? So with Manifold, right, you have a 2D input window on your desktop. You just click in there and you can type, and you can also move your mouse, and that'll happen to whatever thing it's connected to in XR, right? So even if you like your traditional setup, you don't have to abandon it in order to get stuff from Stardust, right? So the whole point of this is that you should be able to do anything you want, XR or 2D, in any way you want, anywhere you want, and anyhow you want, right? It's total flexibility in something that is trivial for everybody to use. And hopefully along the way we can improve privacy and such. That would be nice, right? I forget what this demo is. Oh, it's opening up in celluloid. VLC, please save me. Oh yeah, this is the Magnetar demo again. Yeah, okay. Any more questions for now, I guess? I can't see, so. No more questions? Oh boy. How's my team doing? It only works from the root of the project. Yep, okay. Root of the project. Nope. Nope. Well, shoot. It's only 48 minutes, oh God. If there's no questions, I'm not sure what to do. I guess I could just show you, I don't know really. So, oh, yeah, go ahead. So, you know, bring over the mic, because otherwise, well, I guess I could repeat it. Go ahead.
I can talk loud.
No, but they can't hear you still.
You didn't go
I'll repeat it.
headsets yet, but what do you see as the future of headsets for VR and AR?
That's a, yeah, okay, that's a really good question, actually. So the question was, what do you see as the future of headsets for AR and VR? And I will show you more of star.org. So this is Project North Star. This is a fully open hardware AR headset, though, right? This is somebody actually using it. This is a, hang on, I have a laser. Where's my laser? There's my laser. So this is a GIF of it, how you assemble it and calibrate it and set it up and all of that, right? And you can actually download every single thing with this. And I think this is amazing, right? Because in a lot of cases, though, building your own computer or such, you know, that's really cool, and we've lived with that for years. But with AR and VR devices, though, they're so proprietary that the fact that PSVR 2 could even be opened at all was seen as like a miracle by everybody. So in order to maintain, you know, our understanding of how these devices work, in order to be able to create better ones ourselves, and just the ability to repair your device, you know, we need startups like this. We also have Simula VR, which are creating their own headset, right? Oh, this is going to take a bit to load. Where is the images? Oh, there we go. Yeah, here we go. So this is the Simula one, right? It looks really retro, but the whole idea of this is it's a Linux headset, and it is sort of a portable office on the go. And this thing has a whole Intel NUC in it, right? So it can run your full-on desktop applications as long as they're not like a fancy game or something, right? And so they actually just sent out one of the first early units. They don't want to call it a review unit, right? It's still in the process of being tested and such, but they sent out a unit to somebody other than themselves, and that's a really good sign for any startup, as I'm sure you'll all know. So I think these are two great examples of, Linux on XR headsets, right? And good news is Stardust can work on both of them. So that's a plus, right? And so like the Simula one, right? Right now, what you can do is you can take this, you can put it on, and you can see all of these things. But you'll notice, though, that once it loops back around, they're just flat planes, right? And you can't really do much more than what you could do with a bunch of monitors, right? And that's, these people are hardware people. It makes sense. But with something like Stardust, though, right, you could actually use hand tracking, right, and you could turn this whole wall into a touchscreen. And because that is portable, right, and because it's as open source as it can be, given all of the different deals they've made with bigger companies, you can have a better computing experience with it. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good view into the future. And let's see if they fix the demos this time. I just have to run them manually. On my machine, it works fine. Yep, go ahead. I can repeat it or...
Sure. Any thoughts about sort of multi-user interactions over time? Or
Yes.
networking, like, in the proprietary space, like big screen VR is going to be like a pretty compelling experience. Especially if you have all these objects you can interact with, it'd be great to be able to like bring in other people from outside.
Right. So an important point with that, I'll repeat the question, right? So the question was, what do you think about multi-user interactions and how that will evolve, right? And so with Stardust, right, we have a bunch of different interactions, though, and it's really cool. But one thing that is very important to keep in mind is Stardust has access to your computer directly, right? This is made to be an interface from you to the entirety of computing. But if you share that with other people, they'll have access to your system without a heck of a lot of security. And in order to do that, you sacrifice things on the local side. So for now, Stardust is not collaborative, right? However, there are a lot of other platforms that are really good for that. And Stardust will absolutely be able to hook into all of those, right? So, I didn't even cover the XR stuff. Like, eventually, you're going to be able to put what's called a lens, right, which represents an OpenXR app, into an Oriole, which is a 3D interface for it. So you'll be able to literally take something like Tilt Brush, like I showed earlier in the talk, drop it into a cube, have that be half of your room, and then the other half can be a different VR app, right? And then you can just take your drawing, grab it out of there, and then just drop it in the other side, right? And so you can use all of those collaborative platforms as naturally as you could with something like, something like Figma, right, which is really, really nicely collaborative. So yeah. Anyway, they've informed me that I must run my own demos manually, so I shall do that, like the peasant I am. So. Okay. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this, but Stardust has a flat screen mode. If I just go cargo run, you can run Stardust in flat screen. It's meant to be run in headsets, but it's a great testing mode. And if you don't have an XR headset, you can try out Stardust right now, right? So I'll just show that off. But everything that virtual hand can do, the real hand can do as well. It's just that with this hardware and Monado, it is difficult to, do I seriously not have Poltergeist? Oops. and I know that the time is almost up, but I just want to get this one little demo out for all of you. Poltergeist. And then let's open up. Here we go. So Magnetar's running, Poltergeist is running, and Orbit is running. And so now all I have to do is just launch a Wayland app. And if I have time, I will also get the Hexagon launcher running. Wayland display equals Wayland 1. Right, and so as you can see right here, I can just drop this straight in, and now, if I've done it correctly, I can use a virtual touchscreen. Where's the mouse? That would make it much easier to do all of this. No mouse. Okay. We're dealing with this. Actually, I do have Protostar, so I can show that off. Any more questions? Because we have 2 minutes left. Go ahead. Wait for the microphone, though, to make it easier.
I saw you had a Rift test. Does it work with the original Rift?
The original Rift. Let's see. I do not know if Monado has support for that yet. It's not a Stardust thing, right? Stardust only cares about being an XR desktop, letting you use your Wayland apps and eventually open XR apps. It doesn't really know what headset you have. So you'll have to look at the Monado people. Actually,
Got it. Thank you.
I might be able to check for you. Actually, I'll just do it after the talk. Example. What's the example? Oh, wait, hang on. All right, git check out. Yeah. We're in app grid now. Come on. Oh, this might take a while to compile. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming to this talk. I'm sorry that the demo gods absolutely hated me. I mean, the demo gods here absolutely wanted to smite me from above. But I hope that you all understand more of why XR is so cool and, you know, what I'm doing to make it better. And if you stick around for just a few moments longer, you'll get to see a whole massive array of hexagons, so sci-fi user interfaces, you know, which you can also do, by the way. I mean, there's no reason you can't have a sci-fi user interface that's also incredibly usable, right? You just have to be really careful about it. So, oh, now the internet speed slows to a crawl. They really do hate me today. But yeah.
Theory, there's another session happening right at 6 o'clock. I don't know who's supposed to be here. I don't know.
7 o'clock, you mean? It's 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry, 7 o'clock, yeah. Sorry, 7 o'clock. Right after this one.
Oh, hey, look at that. We might yet have the Hexagon app launcher. Hey, there we go. So we have a Hexagon app launcher here. And if I'm lucky, I should be able to launch something for you to prove that it works. A lot of the icons are broken because this is not the latest one. But I did not have time to get the latest one. Hang on. There we go. And if I'm careful, no. Oh, now you don't launch. Brilliant. Well, it does launch. So, yeah, thank you all for putting up with me.